Okay. Hi guys. Thanarod has an awesome question that I'm really glad that he asked. Okay, I'm just gonna start. This is a long question, but it's really good. All right. So when you triggered the Ginso Tree exit sequence, as soon as the cutscene ended and the water started rising, Steam gave you an achievement, Run for Your Life. I noticed that you died in the water a couple of times before catching on to start running right away. To start running away, I see. Sean Plott also had an experience similar to yours, wherein he died multiple times at the onset of the sequence before catching on. When I played Ori through this area, I saw that achievement pop up on my screen and experienced a moment of confusion. Wait, I just saved the tree, why am I running? And then a moment of realization, oh shit, I need to outrun the water. And I'm beginning to think this might have been intended. The achievement is phrased as a command rather than a phrase, for example. Do you feel like this is a problematic way to signal an event to the player? And how did the momentary confusion impact your experience? And there was a thread on our forums about this. Oh, I totally missed that. That's awesome. I love that there was a thread on the forum about this. So this is a fantastic description of pretty much exactly what went through my head as well. I saw that Steam achievement pop up and exactly in the same way. Like at first I was confused by it, like what does that mean? And then it sort of like dawned on me, okay, this is describing the sequence that's coming up next. It's gonna be some kind of a like timed event. It's gonna be some kind of a race. That's all fine. That's all great. It did not cue me enough. I think the problem was the water started rushing in, and I understood pretty quickly because of that cueing, uh-oh, I'm gonna have to like run away from the water, but not quickly enough to be able to like react to it. Because when I like see the thing, when I see the Steam achievement pop up and I think, oh god, I'm gonna have to start running, that doesn't actually tell me anything about what I should do next, because like where am I running? And my immediate thought is I'm gonna be like running left or right, because that's normally how we go in platforming games, in side scrollers. And so when the water rushes in and I realize like this is a threat, it still takes me a while to understand, okay, this is a threat and I need to be going up. Like up is the direction that I am running. And then even after I realized that, it took me a moment to sort of see like, okay, I have these lanterns, that is my pathway. So I feel like the Steam achievement, I 100% agree that that was intentional. That was designed and phrased as a warning, as a like, you know, as a cue to what you are supposed to do next. I think it is effective as far as it goes. I think that nothing that they give you to cue you is enough to really direct you towards what you're supposed to do fast enough that you could outrun the water. I mean, not that nobody does it. I'm sure there are players who are like very quick to pick up on what's going on, and that they, you know, they start off like with no problem. But in general, I think the experience is going to be like you're going to drown the first time. You're going to drown maybe the first couple of times before you figure out what you're supposed to be doing. If they really didn't want that, if they like really wanted to fix that, I think the solution would be to create clearer pathing. And to create queuing around like this is the direction that you're supposed to go, not just okay, now we're entering a sequence where you're gonna have to run. But honestly, I think it was intentional. I mean, like, let's interpret it, right, as intentional to have done it the way that they did it. And I think the reasoning behind that is that they want to throw you off balance in this sequence. Like, this is a game where I've said this before, like, it seems like it is possible to play it without dying. And this is maybe the first time that I feel like the game has sort of said, yeah, okay, it's possible, and we're gonna like we're gonna pay lip service to the idea that we're warning you what's gonna happen, and you could outrun this rising tide. But really, this is a sequence about you dying a bunch. And honestly, I think this is a sequence about you dying a lot more than you have ever died in the game so far. I think that this sequence was designed very intentionally to feel completely different, to kill you more than like other things have in the past. Not because it's like specifically harder, but because it's longer and excuse me, because it's longer. It's under time pressure. There's no place to sit. There's no way to checkpoint it. And a lot of it has to be executed with a certain degree of precision, and is difficult to see before you actually get there. So it's almost inevitable. I would argue that like it is inevitable. I'm sure there are people who just like fucking plow through this because they're Superman, but I would argue that it is effectively inevitable that you are going to die in this sequence, and you're going to play this sequence over and over and over again until you get through it. And that's sort of unlike any other part of the game so far, and that's intentional because it's setting up that cinematic that happens right after. I think it's all about designing that experience of like honestly, I think this chase is about setting up that narrative moment, which is great. Like, I think it does a great job of it, and I think it's fantastic that it manages to do it in a way that I die a whole bunch and I feel really stressed out about it, but I never feel like I want to give up on it. I always feel like, yeah, I can totally do this. Let me just try it, one more time. I think I can, like, not fuck up. Okay. In the chase scene, the water catches up to a minimum distance if you get too far ahead. Now that you finished that segment, was the constant tension welcome, or would you still have preferred to have accumulated extra time by doing well in the beginning of the run? So, I talked about this a little bit while I was going, that it wasn't giving me cushion, and I think I'm trying to think about how you could possibly do it differently. I think it's extremely intentional the way that they did it. I think that understanding this chase sequence having a narrative purpose, understanding that it is about sort of setting up the cutscene that comes immediately after, that it's about sort of creating this feeling in the player, and even if like you totally discount the content of that narrative sequence, it's about like creating a stress reaction to the owl, right? It's about sort of creating an emotional arc to the game that is associated with the narrative elements that are going on. So knowing that, like understanding that, it is of paramount importance that the player feels stressed out through the entire chase sequence, and having this elasticity to the water level so that it never gives you any cushion. That is the purpose behind that, right? That system it creates an increase in stress in the player. It creates, you know, it doesn't ever allow you to relax. So it creates this sort of constant level of anxiety as you go through the chase. As a player, that got a little bit frustrating. Not so frustrating that I wanted to stop playing, but frustrating to the degree of I could recognize what was happening and it felt antagonistic, right? This felt like something that is that's not totally fair, and it works against me. Whereas for the most part, this game is either fair or it's operating in my favor. And again, this gets into like really fuzzy sorts of places. I feel like we talked around this idea of games that play with you and games that play against you, and we came up with some really good sort of ideas about how to define those things, and now I'm not sure that I'm like talking around those definitions or not, but there's something that like the game, and maybe that's exactly it. Like throughout the game, it feels like you never have to die in order to get through the challenge until you get to this chase sequence, and then all of a sudden the game switches over into this mode where like, yeah, we're gonna kill you a bunch of times and you're gonna make it through this, like, you know, don't worry about that, but you're gonna have to die a bunch of times figuring out how to do it before you can actually do it, which is fundamentally a different mode. And the elasticity of the water contributes to that to a pretty high degree, and it's a recognizable system that contributes to that. And so for me, it sort of feels like, what happened, game? I thought we were friends, right? I thought we were in this together. Why are you doing this to me? What is this thing that you have introduced that is a new system that is clearly working against me in a way that you haven't done before? Like, what's going on? I don't know. I can't think of a good way to have done it better. I'm thinking about, like, could you put a checkpoint into the middle of the thing? Could you put an easier sequence in the middle, so like it starts out easy and then it gets hard and then it's easy for a little while and then it gets hard and then it's easy at the end? But I think that would just be worse. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of a way that you could design this that would be better, that would make the player not feel frustrated at the game, but still sort of create the experience that is the most important part of this sequence. You know, in retrospect, I think they did a good job, because they created that experience and they never made me want to quit playing. And that's what they really needed to do, and I can't think of how they could have done that better. Could you explain what you feel would be the pros and cons of a static water velocity versus a variable velocity as it was actually implemented? I feel like I covered that. Like, it would be a very different experience. So on the one hand, like, it would be easier. It would feel easier, and it would feel like my mastery matters. I would feel like a sense of more agency. I'd feel a sense of more control, right? If I can like rush ahead and that buys me some time, then I feel like I have some control over what's going on. I have more of an opportunity every once in a while to relax. The experience of the chase becomes lots of ups and downs, where like I get ahead and now I feel like I'm okay, I'm ahead, I'm doing all right, and then the water catches up to me and I feel like panicked, oh my god, I gotta rush, and then I like scramble and I get ahead and now I'm okay again, as opposed to the way that they implemented it was just constant, right? There was no ups and downs. It was just a period of the water is just right behind me all the time, which I think is what they were going for, and I think that was extremely deliberate. I lost my place. Can you talk about how you feel about the bash ability and how it increases the depth and complexity of the game without significantly shifting the difficulty? Yeah, so I saw some of this conversation going on in the chat. I mean, the difficulty of the game, I don't know that... I feel like the difficulty of the game is increasing. I feel like this game has a relatively flat difficulty curve. Relatively, like extremely flat difficulty curve. But it's not actually flat. It's just shallow. So the further I go in the game, the more difficult it gets. In addition to that, it also gets more complex, and the bash ability is maybe the most obvious. Maybe it's the only like real example. It's certainly sort of the primary example of that increase in complexity. I don't know that the bash ability makes the game harder, but because it increases the complexity of the game, meaning it increases sort of the number of things that can happen. It increases the possibility space of the game. It increases the tools that are available to the level designers when they create levels. It increases, as sort of, you know, the chat was talking about, it increases the cognitive load on the player when I analyze any given situation, because now I have to think about projectiles, for example, as both obstacles and also opportunities for mobility, and also as sort of things that I can redirect around the world. So it sort of takes, you know, one thing that used to have one specific role in the game, and now it has 3 roles in the game. So that's, you know, that's complexity, and that makes me I have to work harder to analyze each screen, each puzzle. And the level design can be more complex because there's just more stuff that they can do. But none of that necessarily increases the difficulty. It's just the designers have more tools now that they can use when they increase the difficulty. So I think that this game, one of the things that this game does is that it's very carefully paced, and that difficulty curve is shallow, and I think it's you know, very carefully designed where the spikes are, and the spikes are extremely low, right? They're extremely smooth. Difficulty spikes are where you find frustration, where like players get stuck, get frustrated, stop wanting to play your game. And this Ori, you know, you could argue it doesn't have difficulty spikes. You could argue that it just has sort of variations in the difficulty curve, and that makes sense to me. I would go along with that. I'm making that argument, I guess, by myself, because there's nobody here arguing with me. And I think all of those are plotted out very carefully. and they're kind of independent to some extent of the complexity of the game, of the sort of number of abilities that it gives you, the number of enemies that it introduces, the number of different types of things that you have to think about and have to do. You know, it can increase the complexity and keep the difficulty the same just by like being careful about how it uses those elements in the level design. And so I think that like you know, it does a really good job of increasing the complexity, not immediately going overboard and using the newly introduced complexity to create more difficult levels, but instead sparingly use and gradually introduce subtleties to the new complexity, so that the levels maintain the same sort of gradual increase in difficulty that they've had for the entire game. None of that was like practical advice or even like specific to what the game is doing. I have no examples. That's just like this game is really good and it's doing this thing at a high level. I feel good about it. How do you feel about Bash stopping time? Do you enjoy having more time to plan, or do you think it makes it easier? Also, as a developer, how hard is it to scale the whole game with an ability the player now has to get an extra second to think nearly anywhere in the game? Right, so yeah, I see what you're saying. So first of all, I think that it's implemented well. I think that I have a hard time imagining. So again, like, if you did this, if you implemented this, where Bash didn't stop time, or stopped time for, you know, a fraction of what it does now, then there would be pretty much no way to introduce the Bash ability in a way that didn't increase difficulty pretty dramatically, right? Like it would be a lot harder to design a level where you needed to use Bash, where a new player who wasn't used to it wouldn't be prone to failure. Especially because when you're jumping around, when you're using Bash for mobility, when you're using Bash to like move Ori around the screen, it doesn't require like super high precision. And maybe as we go further, it will, like, the level of precision that's required will go up. But in general, because of how much you can move while you're in the air, and because of that double jump, and because of the wall climb, you kind of just need to aim in the general direction that you want Ori to go, and that's good enough. When you're redirecting projectiles, you need to be extremely accurate. And it would be insanely difficult to do that at the level of precision that it requires without practice, if it didn't give you time to like aim and line up your shot. And I would argue that that extends to the like regular jump as well. You know, even at the low level of precision that it requires, for a new player who has not been introduced to this and has not practiced it, to be able to like use the Bash ability to jump around with any kind of precision, if there was no time stop, I think that's just a much more difficult thing. And so introducing that becomes sort of de facto an increase in the difficulty of the game. I mean, it's hard to maintain that sort of like very even difficulty curve when you introduce something like that. Now, okay, so the second part of this question is really interesting. It's, so now that I have this ability to freeze time for like a second, that means that anywhere in the game where I can use bash, which is quite a lot of places, and there's a good chance that as I move forward, it's going to be more and more places. That means that I basically have a second, I can pause the game for a second at any time, for argument's sake, let's say, at any time, in order to sort of like see what's going on and think about what I want to do. Even if I don't like, even if I'm not using the bash ability to jump around or redirect projectiles, I keep forgetting the word projectile. It's so weird. I've said it like 100 times so far tonight and I keep forgetting it. I don't know that I feel like that's a huge advantage, honestly, and maybe I'm just not a power player. Like, I don't play at the level where that extra second is gonna like really be meaningful for me. But I feel like if it's a matter of the advantage to it is that I can pause the action briefly while still being able to see the screen. And so I can see what's going on, I can see where projectiles are. I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to this question after I've played some more with the bash ability, when I've actually like had an opportunity to see how this kind of use of it might play out in practice. But right now I have a hard time imagining like using the like where in situations that I have seen in the game as I am familiar with it right now, where I would use bash in order to pause time just for that ability. Let's revisit this question later. I don't have an answer for it right now. Okay, I'm only going to do one or two more. Regarding the Ginso Tree, that is absolutely valid. I understood when I was breaking down the red stuff around the heart of the tree that it was dropping lanterns nearby. I had the question originally of what are these lanterns doing there? That seems ominous, and was able to connect them easier. Yeah, I did. I saw the one lantern that was sort of at the top that was like surrounded by spiky stuff. And I did think like, okay, so I'm gonna need to use that at some point later. Yeah, it's, you know, I think it's just a matter of like on a player-to-player basis, how long does it take for you to connect all of the dots? And if they wanted you to be able to do it easily, like right away on the first try, then there would be specific signaling between those dots, right? That would help you connect all of that. That would, for example, have you ever used those lanterns to go up at any point? To use the background art to visually create a path that leads up those lanterns. I mean, honestly, just to give you more time, once the water starts, to make it clear that it is coming from the bottom of the screen and you need to start moving, it comes in really, really fast. I think it's up to the player, like it's up to the individual player how quickly they are able to make all of those connections and start moving in the right direction and outrun the water. But I think the experience is designed so that in general, you're not gonna do it. You're gonna die once or twice before like you get your shit together and are able to do it. I think that's the general experience that they're going for. Fun side note, when it comes to you never feeling like you wanted to stop despite you dying, I died literally 300 times in that sequence over the course of 3 hours. And just between the soundtrack and the pure joy of mastering the sequence one step at a time, I had a blast doing it. I'm in 100% agreement. I'm super glad that sort of feeling and analysis of how the core mechanic and the experience that has been designed around seeing what you're supposed to do and feeling like you can learn what to do next and feeling like you always have the ability to master something, that all of that persists, even over an extended period of time. I love to hear that, because I feel like it's really strong. I feel like they did it really well, I didn't actually have to play it for 3 hours, and that's great. Like I love that I didn't have to do that, because I would get frustrated at that just because I'm streaming. Like at some point I would like Hotline Miami it and be like, this is fucking insane. I can't believe I've done the same thing for 3 hours. What am I doing on Twitch? But I'm glad that like if you're just playing it, if you're just like getting the pure experience of it, then it maintains that quality of being satisfying. That's great. That's super, super, super. Okay, in the first week you spoke about the blue orb save currency and how its scarcity restricts your ability to save, and that may be an early game mechanic. Now that you have several more orbs, does the save currency still feel like something you need to worry about? A lot less, but yes, still somewhat. I am the player, I mean like this, I'm not the only player. I know a lot of players will do this, but not every player. But I'm the player who will like, max out their health kits in a JRPG, or like get whatever the super weapon is, like grenade, if I can hold 6 grenades, then I will always be holding 6 grenades. I will never ever use them because maybe I'll need one later. So if I have, if I've got 6 energy orbs, and I've got them filled, like I'm definitely more willing to just create a save point. But at the same time, if my energy isn't filled, then I feel like at any moment I could be missing an opportunity right around the corner. Like at any moment I could turn the corner and I need more energy than I have, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. And I would rather have my energy be maxed out all the time than ever have it be less than max. So I still feel an internal pressure to conserve that, and to treat it like it's a scarce resource, even though at this point it's becoming practically less and less of a scarce resource. And I think that's a balance. Like, I'm describing this sort of internal pressure that definitely affects my behavior, but at the same time I also feel like I'm much more willing to use them than when I only had like 2. And at that point I was like, oh God, can I create a save? I'm so freaked out about it. And now I'm like, yeah, seems like a good place. Let's create a save here. But at the same time, like I want them to be full all the time. And I'm not comfortable if I like use half of them and I just don't have half of them. That would make me really anxious. So some of it is just, you know, being kind of crazy, I guess. Awesome. Thanks everybody. These are great questions. I'm loving this game. This game is fantastic. I think that there's going to be a play-by-play next week. Next weekend is Indiecade, and it technically starts on Thursday. And I will be working it early on Friday, I'm sure. I have no doubt. And I'll probably be involved on Thursday, but I don't know if I'm going to be involved Thursday night. I don't know. It's kind of up in the air what the schedule is going to be. So as of right now, I am planning on doing play-by-play next Thursday, continuing to play Ori. I'll, you know, update Twitter if that looks like it's going to fall through. Also, for anybody who's still around, tomorrow night it looks like I'm going to be on Geek and Sundry for Gather Your Party, playing a tabletop role-playing game called Restless that is like really super cool and I'm excited about. So yeah, if you're around, tune in for that. I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thanks for watching me play Ori and the Blind Forest. This game is so cool. I'm glad that people are enjoying it as much as I am, and I can't wait to play more of it. So let's get together again sometime soon, and I hope you guys have a great week between now and then. All right, thanks very much. Have a good night.